Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I welcome back Rich Dolan and Michael Chard for another conversation. And this week we want to talk about bromance. Mike, Rich, and I talk about the stigma around bromance and men's mental health. And we also touch on how, as men, we can support each other and change the whole narrative around romance or seeking help from each other. I really hope you can get a lot out of this episode. And if at the end you could leave a 5-star review, I would truly appreciate it. Gents, welcome back to the podcast. So I've got Rich today and Mike. Michael Chard and Richard Dolan, who've also have been on the podcast before. So no introductions required at this point. But today we wanted to touch on the topic of bromance and how it's often frowned upon. But for me personally, I don't know about you guys, but I've been able to connect with you guys over Instagram. Never met you guys in person. But, I really appreciate the bond we've been able to build, a little bit of a community we've got here supporting each other and talking about mental health specifically, but then also, the compliments I receive from both of you. So I really appreciate the the kind words. But yeah, I wanted to turn it over to you guys and, talk about some of the support we've been able to give and really talk about some of the mental health challenges, whether it's lockdowns or just personal stuff we're dealing with.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, good to be back. Do you want to jump in, Mike, first? I want to talk over you.
No, you carry on, mate. You go right ahead. I don't mind. I'll quite happily sit in the sidelines and wait my turn.
See, we're all very polite.
Make the place look nice and stylish.
Yeah. You're gonna just kind
of. You've got the mule. You've got the mule. I'll let you go.
I've got the mule. Yeah. So it's good to be back having a chat. This is something we've talked about for a while. So it's good we finally managed to kind of get it down. I guess the bromance thing is it's that word, isn't it? It's a stigma that's kind of around that word. It's almost something that's used in a derogatory way, like to kind of belittle something as less than, I guess, but it's a thing. We've connected on Instagram, 3 complete random people who've come together on a platform of millions, and I think it's something that, as you said, Furkan, and I know for myself, it's been good to have over the last few months. With everything that's been going on, personally and professionally, and from a global perspective with the lockdowns and the pandemic, to be able to have this kind of little space where we've checked in and had random conversations and actually been able to explore stuff free of the restrictions, if you like, of long-standing relationships or family or friends or whatever. It's been quite refreshing. And I guess for me, the fact that it's been completely unexpected has probably been the most significant thing, that it kind of popped up out of nowhere. It wasn't something I went looking for or really ever knew was there. So it's kind of like been a very new experience on many levels. That's my little bit, Mike. So you can jump in now.
Yeah. Well, I think especially the idea of bromance and the thing of, yeah, bro, want to do this, bro, let's go and do this. But for even before lockdown, yeah, bro. But even before lockdown kicked in, it was always perceived to be like a bit of a toxic thing, wasn't it? Having a bromance with somebody or a group of men. I think it was, in the UK at least, tied very much to like soccer culture and football culture and sports and that type of thing. I suppose, for me, bromance from a male perspective is important. I think bromance is just a toxic word, I suppose, for something which means you have a close an open relationship with men around you. And I've quite that's how I could have put this. Over the years, I've had quite a number of really close relationships which have developed with people either through school or through workplaces, and like you mentioned earlier on, Rich, meeting up with you and Furkan on the podcast on Instagram, complete fluke, but we seem to get on really, really well. And even before we started recording this podcast, the amount of banter which is flying around online. Poor Furkan. Oh, he's got both barrels so far during this. Yeah, I think for everybody listening to the podcast, Furkan has amazing hair and rides a motorcycle, and we're jealous of him.
Yeah. Let's move on, Mike. I don't want to go there right now. It's too painful.
Well, I think as we're talking about bromance, I find it quite fascinating that there's even a term for it, right? When women have close friendships and they support each other, there's no like label to it. It's just they're called friends.
Yeah, and it's kind of expected, isn't it, with women that they have these very strong bonds or very strong groups.
Yeah, and whenever it's like you hit it off with a man, like I've met amazing people throughout my life, and you kind of connect with a man, and everyone stands around and is like, oh, these two have bromance, and it's like, well, why can't we just become good friends?
Yeah, why does it have to have a word? Why does it have to be something that you kind of put a label on to
exactly
to highlight that it's different or something?
Exactly. And then the second you start labeling things, it's almost like, well, it's different, it's not normal. And that's where I find quite fascinating, especially in the world where we're in right now, where we're encouraging men to just go out there and be themselves, but we start labeling things. So
yeah, really interesting. And what Mike said as well about groups of guys together that, or pockets of men that get on, it seems to be acceptable when or expected when it's in, as you say, a sporting context. So either playing sport together or supporting some sort of sport. So there's that kind of tribalistic element to it, but there doesn't seem to be a space where it's just like you say, guys being friends as such. So I think this encouragement for men to kind of talk about themselves and express how they feel and be different than these kind of boxes that they've been put into is really difficult when there isn't a space that's made where guys can kind of go into and do these sorts of things without everyone going, oh, check you guys out, the bromance. Oh, are you talking to your new best friend tonight? It's not a thing, it's not really anything other than, as you say, people connecting, people getting on, finding things in common and being able to talk in a way which is liberating, because perhaps there isn't that judgment there or isn't that insecurity because you just happen to be on the same page, so to speak.
It's a question for you both. Often within groups of people, whether it's mixed sex or single sex or whatever, there'll always be one person or maybe two people that you'll resonate with more than others and establish a much more closer bond with. And that's where the moniker bromance comes to. Over your lifetime, have either of you ever had that really close-knit relationship with somebody, and then eventually through whatever reason, whether you grow apart, you've had a disagreement, or it's just life gets in the way and you fall out of contact? You ever had those relationships fall apart, and what was the impact on your mental health? For me, as you can probably guess, I'm coming from a point of experience. For me, I had one, a really close friend which I grew up with from school. We knew each other for over 20 years, and then all of a sudden it's just gone. One day it was, you couldn't do, and you couldn't even so much as wake up and have a cup of coffee without FaceTiming each other. And then within the space of 2, 3, 4 weeks, it completely dissolved. And the impact that had on me was extremely negative, which I'll go into later on. But I think the question really I was put to you guys is, what have your experience been with bromance? How have you felt, and what value did you get out of it? I mean, bromance as in close relationship with a dude.
Yeah, I think that's definitely happened to me. I mean, I'm definitely an introvert, and I've never, throughout my life, so my best friends now, are sort of 2 or 3 guys that I've known for 30 odd years, since first school, really. And I feel incredibly lucky to have those relationships in my life. But there's been only a few people that I've ever got significantly close to, during that time. But there was one guy in particular who he actually was my best man at my wedding, and we don't have any contact anymore and haven't had. It's really weird you mentioned this actually, because randomly I found out this weekend he's got married again through a mutual friend. So it kind of came back into my mind, and now you've mentioned this, because that was a friendship where we were kind of we were a bit of a duo for a time, and I've often tried to understand exactly what happened there. I mean, he had a lot of issues of his own as well, but I think it was very much about it had a time limit to it, if you know what I mean. There were factors to it that were far greater than just he and I and the friendship we had. It was, life was moving us in different ways, had different plans for us, and it's difficult to look back now on that friendship and imagine it being alive today, because I know that I am, and I'm pretty sure he is as well. We're fundamentally different people than we were, and we did outgrow each other. But at a time, I remember that would seem inconceivable to think that there would be a point where we didn't get on, or we didn't have a connection. But things change, and everything has, everything ends basically at some point. But this is right describe your experience. That's you then deal with the loss and the grief, because there's a bereavement there of a relationship.
Yeah, no, I again, Rich, very similar experience. So my cousin and I, who I never knew until I moved cities, became really good friends, and very similar to yourself. Like he was the best man at my wedding. We traveled a lot, like together, went on trips, and then he was the best man at my wedding, and then things just kind of fell apart from there, and we don't even talk anymore. So very similar experience. And like you said, there was a loss associated with it. But I'm also a firm believer, well, now I am, as I get more wisdom in life, that, I think people come into your life to serve a purpose. And, most often when that purpose has been served, they're gone. And there's some very limited people who stay in your life forever, but everyone, I feel like, has a purpose. And you can look at it as, a negative thing, or you can look at it as something like, now I look at a lot of the relationships, like, again, I'm going through another kind of loss just recently, and it's been tough to deal with, but it's looking at, okay, what did I learn from that experience? What did this person teach me? And, looking at that positive attribute or thing they brought into my life. So I think it's important to look at that, because, you can focus on the negativity and be like, oh yeah, this person was a bad person. They did this to me. Or you can look at it, what you learned, right? And I think, experiencing those losses from having close friends, they teach you something. But it's also looking at it, like I said, that everyone comes in, they have a role. It's like a movie, right? They all have a role to play in your life, which is essentially a very long movie. And very few stick around. And as I get older, I've come to I've accepted the fact that, on my circle of friends is going to get smaller and smaller. It's just the way it goes, right? As you get older, and what kind of people you want to surround yourselves with. And it's for me, it's also about what value am I getting from the relationship. And I know it sounds very materialistic, but in terms of value, what I mean is, am I learning something from them? Are they inspiring me? Are they pushing me to be a better person? And those are the qualities I look for now in terms of the people I surround myself with.
I suppose to quote Vision from the MCU, a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts. And I suppose that's a good way of looking at it in terms of relationships. Ferg, I think you're right. People come in, they serve a purpose, and they stay from whatever has been determined, and then they go at the appropriate time. And I think, Richard, a comment you just made about becoming dramatically different people over time from where you were. That's something I've probably not considered, and something I'm going to definitely take away from this call, because I've always left it as a relationship which failed, which I thought was probably either my fault to some degree, but I never worked out the reason why. And I've struggled with thinking about that relationship over and over and over again. I've come to terms with it, but that's mainly because of the amount of time that's elapsed since we last spoke up until present time. But I think you're right. It is a case where life has taken us in different directions. We are different people now. And I suppose that if we sat in a bar and had a pint, we'd probably find it difficult to actually establish common ground.
Yeah, because quite a lot of what we think is actually, a strong connection is environmental or circumstantial. We just happen to be in a similar place at a similar time, and that compensates for the fact that we've not sort of developed that strong bond as such. It's just that we happen to click within the context that we've met. But I think it's important to recognise as well, like you said, Firkin, that people come into our lives, they serve a purpose. But we're also serving that purpose for other people. So we're all kind of like interacting with each other on this sort of transactional sort of basis. But I think one of the things that I've certainly wrestled with over the years where it's come to friendships is because I'm introverted and I tend to have smaller groups of friends that are really important to me, and I like to really invest in those relationships, is that, when I was younger, certainly I had expectations of those relationships and expectations of the people. And it's taken me a long time to accept that, for instance, my very close friends who I've known for many years, I'm not disrespecting our friendship or letting me down or, kind of not meeting my needs. They are just being who they are. And actually, when I felt that, I don't get what I need from them, it's not actually about them. It's about me. We've talked about this before in some context, but I think sometimes friendships, we have expectations of them to meet our needs. And we need to recognize that, like you talked about life being a film, and this is our script. I think sometimes we cast the wrong people in the roles that we write, and we get frustrated with their performance because, they're the wrong actor for a particular part. So as you get older, as you said, Firkin, as we become more hopefully wise, not just weary, we start to perhaps understand a little bit better who are the sort of people that we would want to invest in a friendship with. And I think from the bromance thing, as a guy, it happens so rarely that when you do meet somebody like that, or you do have that kind of experience, you're like, dude, right, where have you been? Let's get into it. Don't happen.
I think Rich touched on something really important that I've also experienced recently, and it's the expectations. And very similar, like I kind of, the common trap I fall into is expecting my friends or other people in my relationship to treat me the way I treat them, right? So I'm, my close friends or partners that I'm in relationships with, I'm very loyal. So if they call me in the middle of the night and they need something, I will be there to help them, right? And then often there's times where I need that kind of support. And if people fail to deliver, I take it personally and I get upset. And that's, for me, like Rich said, is understanding that, I'm expecting them to do what I would do, which means I'm almost saying, well, I'm not doing it because, it's understanding that I'm doing those things because that's who I am. And for them, they're doing who they are. And I can't expect people to be treating everyone the same, because then it would just be a very difficult and complicated world. So the biggest thing I've come to realize also is just being me, doing what I would normally do with not a lot of expectations. So just being cognizant of that has made a huge difference as well.
Yeah. Good points. And this whole idea about treating other people the way that we that we kind of want to be treated. We have this kind of idea like, well, if I do X, Y, and Z for them, then surely they'll do that for me. And then when they don't, we're like, I can't believe him, and we get angry. So I think we spend a lot of time in friendships which aren't true friendships, where neither party is particularly happy or getting their needs met, but you kind of go along with that. feeling slightly aggrieved, or only seeing people in certain situations because the friendship only works within that context. Like I've definitely got some friends like that I can only really engage with them if there's another person, a certain other person there to kind of bring the dynamic in, or I will only do something with them where it's an active thing because we wouldn't be able to sit down and have a kind of conversation, So, you get different things from different friends, but ultimately what I think I enjoy the most is where I don't feel that I'm having to compromise a part of myself in order to enjoy the interaction. I think that's where, like just talking to you guys over the last few months, it's been really easy and really relaxed. And finding that randomly, on a social media platform, for someone that doesn't use social media, it's a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
Especially at my advanced years. This is another thing. As you get older, the opportunities for meeting new people, they become less because you're out less, you're socializing less, or you're in a family situation, you're in routine. You kind of, you're limited because it's only perhaps the other parents at the, at the school gates, or the after school club, or the weekend thing that you see. So you don't have the opportunity of interaction that you do when you're younger.
Yeah, I suppose for me, I found, especially in my younger years, I struggled to make friends really, and that was mainly I spent most of my time on my guard. And as I've become older and into my older years, I've kind of I find it a lot easier now to strike up conversation with complete strangers. And it's so much just like, even if you're even if you're getting a cup of coffee and a Costa, and being able just to, hi, how you doing? All right, yeah, nice weather today, and making small talk, men, women, doesn't matter, whatever.
Do you just stand there all day and talk to everyone that comes in?
Yeah, I'm that bloke.
You're that guy, yeah.
I'm that guy. And the guy who sits on a bus all day long, one that washes every 6 months or something. No, it's very much an easy. I don't know how whether or not it's just because I just think, sod it, or it's just the benefit of old age. I just find I'm not so confrontational. I suppose as I've hit my 40s, especially my mid 40s now, the testosterone level has dropped, so I don't feel like I want to tear everybody to pieces. And is that person going to attack me? That stupid overthinking thing that kicks in the back of your head when you're a young lad. But I just feel so much more at ease. If you'd asked me 15 years ago to jump onto a podcast with a couple of guys that we met on Instagram to talk about men's mental health, hell no. But now, God, what a difference. What a difference.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point you make about the testosterone thing, because again, groups of guys getting together, traditionally it brings up that, chest puffing, kind of strutting around, the social hierarchy, the alpha male. And that can really get in the way of just literally trying to get to know somebody and get on with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of guys still struggle with it. I see it, like there's guys, we're talking about age. I definitely agree. Like for me now, if someone's got a strong opinion about something, I don't get into that argument anymore like I used to. Or if they're saying something completely obnoxious or offensive, I just, kind of like accept it for what it is, or accept their opinion, and there's no need for me to argue. But I still see guys my age who are still trying to be the alpha or prove a point. And I think most guys, as you get older, your ego kind of takes a back seat, because, and I think for many reasons, I think it's through life experiences. I know for me personally, I've been humbled many times over the years where I'm like, you know what, my ego needs to, just needs to check itself out. It's not doing me any favors. And I think it comes with life experiences, and whether you're willing to learn something from them or continue to do the same thing. And then that's where it's like, you continue to do the same thing, hoping for different results. They're not going to come. So yeah, I think that's what's helped me is kind of like accepting people for what they are, and understanding everyone's got a different perspective.
I think bromances are incredibly important, especially I think in your developing years, when you're teens into 20s. I think they they are important, I think, as you get older, but they hold different value. Such as someone that you can meet up and have a drink at a pub, or meet up every now and then to have something to eat, have a face-to-face video call, be on call for that person as a support network. Those types of things are more attributable now, I suppose, in the age group I am now, as opposed to when I was in my 20s. It was ring, ring, hello, yeah, let's go to the pub. And that was the extent of my bromance, really. And all that social construct around having a bromance, of learning the ropes of sexuality, dating, family life, career, all those expectations that were kind of put upon you within your social group and society as a whole. You kind of used your bromance as a microcosm to grow yourself, as a bouncing off someone with similar likes or dislikes in order to grow your own personality. And now, as I know who I am. I'm fat, I'm middle-aged, I'm grey. I'm a martial artist who hurts and spends 10 minutes getting up off the mat. But I know lots of people in the same boat as me, so there's no conflict anymore, and it's so refreshing.
Yeah, I think part of the reason, I think for me personally, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but even being younger and going to like hang out with my friends, we were always distracted. It was like chasing women or not really engaged in conversation. And now for me, I'm comfortable just sitting there with, even going out with one friend and us, just two dudes sitting there and having a conversation and not getting distracted. And then I find, we talk about testosterone. I think when you're younger, it's also that those competitive juices, right? Like as men, it's normal for us to be competing. Like that's where we thrive. And that, I think with age, or just again, wisdom, you just stop thinking that way. You're just comfortable accepting the guy across the table from you, and there's no competition.
I think that's what it's ultimately about. It's just acceptance of self. And we've been conditioned for generations to, as you say, to compete with each other. There's a biological element here. Ultimately we're all designed to try and make ourselves the most appealing specimen out there. That's genetically what we're kind of like biologically set up to do. But society's changed. I can't imagine what it must be like for boys to grow up into men in this world compared to my experience. Very, very different, I'd imagine. And I do a lot of work around some of those themes as a therapist. But there's something I wanted to say earlier in terms of when you were saying about the stigma around romances and the kind of groups of guys getting together, football, the lads out on the beer or whatever. There's also another thing that seems to be kind of accepted, but again stigmatized, which is the kind of the more primal side of men getting together. And there's quite a few groups. I know there's a few pages like this on Instagram. That kind of stripping back. Everybody's kind of sat on the beach bare-chested, or making camps with their boys. There's a lot of kind of reclaiming masculinity things, or focusing on developing the bond between fathers and sons through kind of outdoor related workshops, this kind of stuff as well. So it's kind of like, again, that's a validated version of going and being a man, or doing men things with other men. But it seems to be another kind of caricature almost of being a man. Whereas where's the bit in the middle where you can just sit and have a conversation with other guys about stuff that you can all relate to without it having to be labeled or packaged as a thing,
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, so I think those are all great points. So for me personally, where I see the struggle though is, even with bromance, and again, I want to get your thoughts on this, or do you guys feel comfortable enough to be able to talk about your emotions and feelings? Because I still find that a struggle. In fact, I did a video recently on Instagram as well about really, even though I know, and I'm preaching to other men that, hey, speak express your emotions, trust each other, encourage other men to do the same. But I still struggle with it myself, where I can't, even just going through like my recent breakup, just not being able to like fully express myself, or just tell my friends that, hey, you know, I am having a hard time. I just need to be able to talk about it. And even when I do talk about it, I don't get into the specifics of what I'm feeling. I still tend to act like it's okay. You know, yeah, it sucks, but I'm okay. I'm okay. And I don't feel like most days I am okay.
Personally, if you'd asked me this question in my 20s and 30s, I would have agreed with you. I would have said, for Kenya, I would struggle to get what I mean out of my mouth. And I struggle to establish a link with how I'm feeling and what I'm saying. And I do exactly the same thing. Yeah, all good. Anyone asked me a question when it is in my 20s, it's been, yeah, how you doing, Mike? Yeah, fine, I'm good. However, since after being diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression a few years ago, I have a tendency to flip the other way now, which is overshare. So I recently started taking over a men's mental health working group in my workplace, and I got into a conversation with a couple of guys in that call, and it was almost as if it was a race to the bottom of who could feel the worst fastest. And it was not what we wanted to achieve, but for some reason it acted as if that was the release or the valve in order to get everything out. And all those expectations about being in work and keep calm, carry on, and I'm a bloke and all that, and I should be able to accept and handle it. For my 20s and 30s, now I'm in my 40s and I'm in that context of doing a men's mental health working group. It was so much easier for me to come out with everything. And I suppose through the use of this podcast, because I don't have the bromance as such anymore in order to have these open conversations with that one person, I've kind of used the podcast as a way of releasing my feelings. And that experience of what I've gone through recently, of what I've come up to recently, and things that I look back in my life and go, these are the type of issues I've come up with. This is how I dealt with it. Put it on a podcast, send it out there for the big wide broad to experience. That's been with me. So that was a very long-winded and convoluted answer to your very simple question. Sorry for it, Ken.
No,
it's standard from me, I think.
It's not simple at all, because obviously for me, I personally struggle with it, with certain things. So I guess I have something to look forward to when I turn 40.
Yeah, open and brutal honesty. Yeah, you get at 40 years old, just loading the shells into the conversation shotgun like this. Who wants it? Come on, go on, Richard, you're next.
No, it makes sense what you're both saying, and I think it's a bit different for me because obviously as a therapist, I'm all about talking about how you feel and kind of encouraging people to do that. And I don't really feel that I've ever found it difficult to talk about my feelings. What I found difficult was that other people didn't understand what I was saying, or that by doing so, certainly from a male perspective, during those early years, it set me apart because that's not what my friends were doing. And there were all sorts of I remember being called all sorts of names just for essentially being kind of sensitive to being able to articulate how or even talking about it. So the message I had very early on was, you're going to isolate yourself by doing that. But it made me feel very alone. And I think it's interesting what you said there, Mike, about this kind of this space that you're curating at work, and there's a very real risk of it becoming that race to the bottom very quickly. And I've seen this as a therapist coming into Instagram, and I've kind of been feeling my way. And a large part of my journey has been Firkin, you were kind of there at the beginning of it, really. So one of the things I've found as a therapist is that actually the space around mental health is actually predominantly full of people that are doing exactly that, processing their own experiences and matching them against others and seeing where they are in their own kind of process of evaluation. And there is this kind of trauma porn element to it, where people want to be more damaged than the other or have experienced more than the other. But there is also that other space where people find it really liberating and safe to be able to talk about how they feel, because they're amongst other people that are doing exactly that. And that's what I spend, that's my working week, around people who are at the point where they want to talk. And I guess what I've found challenging is that long ago I came to the realization that, as I said, a lot of my friends just are not the people that are ever going to give me what I need when it comes to talking about how I feel. And I've just learned not to go there for it. And sometimes that does mean that I haven't got anywhere to go. And that, I have, as a therapist, I have supervision. I have personal therapy as well, because it's something that I find that it helps, me to have that space, because I know now what it is that I need. So I'm able to explore things like that in therapy, because I know that I'm not going to get them from certain friends. But then those are the very same friends that will take me to that place that I need to be taken to sometimes, which is that banter, which is that stupid childish humor, which is the sharing of silly messages, or the kind of the relentless piss taking, as we say over here in the UK, that actually is just as important and just as healthy to have in a relationship, because it's that, it's that free child thing. It's that part of us that we need to have nurtured. Because if we approach life as just being completely serious all the time, then it becomes very difficult to find joy in life. So that's why having these friendships, I think, where we can feel like at times like kids again, free of all this stuff that comes as you grow up, I think is really, really important. Again, did I out ramble Mike there? I think I went for.
I think you're close. You're almost in the first position spot.
More seconds. I'll come up with some other words.
I'll get my stopwatch going here, but but I think interesting to note, though, talking about the race to the bottom, and like many things, the pendulum just swings from one extreme to the other, and that's what I'm finding. Like it's like people that are sharing their traumatic stories or whatever they're struggling with are now celebrated, and which is great. I think you want to people to have that liberty, but the pendulum swung so far that it's almost like if you don't have, at least this is my perception, if you don't have a story of adversity or serious challenge, then you're almost not even heard, because you're like,
it's invalidated.
And then you almost start comparing. So like, even for me, like if I'm struggling with something, I'm like, who's going to want to listen to me? Meanwhile, someone else has got some serious issues. Mine are not that serious. So then you almost feel like invalidated in the sense, because you're like, well, I don't feel like I need to be complaining right now because my troubles are not as serious. So I don't know what are your thoughts on that, but I do see that quite a bit. And even like, I feel like even when I go for therapy, it's almost like I'm talking myself out of it. I'll be like, this happened and it was that bad, but I shouldn't be complaining. I should be grateful.
I think we have a tendency to rationalize stuff as not being as severe as it actually is when we go to therapy. I certainly did that. It's almost a coping mechanism in itself, isn't it? You got to justify the way you're feeling. You got somebody that's not being confrontational, but therapy can be perceived that way. I know I did, when someone's peering into you and looking into or giving you some reasoned explanation as to why you feel X and Y, and to have then that feeling of but it's all good, it's all right. It kind of takes that, diffuses the feeling, doesn't it? But I meant to say earlier on, after when we were talking about friendships and things, completely forgot to mention it. This was a friend of mine gave me some really, 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 really good advice, and we had a very good relationship over a long period of time, and that's developed into something else now, and that's changed and moved on. And that was a really open sort of, I'm trying to find a word of explaining it now, but I'm not doing a very good job. We had a friendship which was very beer orientated, girl orientated, and as we've grown up, we've now moved into kids, family, cars, houses, investments, property, and I hope he's listening to this. Yeah, so that was actually quite a good growth thing for me. I meant to mention it earlier on, sorry, but It was a relationship whereby it started off as one thing and actually moved into something else.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes people grow with us, you know, they, that goes back to that whole timing thing, people coming into our lives. But just to touch on Firkin's point about that kind of, discrediting our own emotional experiences because we know that other people are having it worse. You know, I know I've talked about this on Instagram, and a personal example of this is a while back. You know, I've spoken to you guys about the stupid thing I did to my finger, and I put that video up where I was like, okay, so you're probably going to have this operation because I didn't look at it, I didn't get it looked at when it happened. So I use that as an example to say, like, you know, deal with the problem when it happens, otherwise it will become something more. So I've had my operation and I've got this kind of this wonky finger now, which is never going to be totally right. And I was on the phone, I was on the call with my therapist the other week, and I said, I'm annoyed because I remember the night it happened. I remember being at home thinking, like a little voice in my head saying, you should probably go to A&E. And I was just like, no, it'll be all right, it'll be fine. And she was saying to me, well, look, you know, don't beat yourself up. You didn't know. And I said, I did know, this is the thing. I can't lie to myself because I knew that there was something that was saying to me, you should probably get this checked out. And if I had, they could have given me a splint, which would have meant that when it started to heal, it wouldn't be wonky and it wouldn't be, I probably wouldn't have had to have the operation. But the point was, I was saying to her that I was annoyed with myself, and she was trying to kind of let me see that it perhaps wasn't my fault. But it was because I knew that I should have gone. And she said something very interesting to me. She said, was it because that you just didn't think you were important enough? If it happened to one of your children, you would have taken them. And what I think you were talking about there ultimately, Firkin, is that self-worth. You know, so if we have any sort of self-doubt about, you know, our own emotional experiences, they will be exacerbated when we enter into an arena where we're instantly comparing, and we will gravitate towards things that validate this feeling of low self-worth and say, well, actually, and I hear it all the time, you know, I shouldn't complain because people have it so much worse, you know, or, you know, I don't know why I'm making such a big deal out of it. It could be this or it could be that, or, you know, my friend has this or that, and we find all these reasons to squash how we feel. And if you apply that to groups of men don't encourage each other to talk at the best of times. So you know, it can become quite a lonely place, I think, because everyone's trapped there and no one's helping them to feel important enough to talk about how they feel, you know. So it's all very well saying ask your mate if he's okay, and I know in the UK we've got the ask twice thing, but you know, that doesn't make somebody automatically comfortable to talk. You can ask them 3 times, and that isn't necessarily going to get them to open up if they don't feel safe to do that.
Yeah. And I think part of it is what I try to tell people is, you know, your experience is your experience. It can't be relative. Whatever you're going through is what you're going through, and you shouldn't feel shameful because you're, you know, if you've lost a job, it might not be as bad as someone else going through a significant loss. And it's not about comparison. It's all about what you're feeling in that moment and accepting it. So it's definitely an important point. And again, it's easier said than done because we all kind of tend to use that rationale that, you know, my problem is not that bad, or I'll be okay. And it comes back to self-worth for sure. But yeah, it's something I wanted to touch on, right? And I think speaking of bromance, like being able to see that in your friends, or giving them that space to be able to talk about it. I did want to highlight, you know, I appreciate the you know, everything, just being able to have these conversations with you guys, and you know, even just kind of reaching out and checking in. I've really appreciated that. It's been a tough go lately, so you know, I appreciate you guys just keeping in touch. Again, different time zones, but it's helped immensely just knowing that there's someone there I can even message and be like, hey, yeah, it's been a hard go. Can we talk? So it does help a lot.
Always there.
Sometimes that's all you need, isn't it? To know that somebody's just there, you know, just to be able to say, hey, how's it going? And you know, to have that kind of that ear or that space just to be able to, you know, have 5 minutes even, you know, and that I think is what these things are about. You don't need to constantly be doing stuff together or like, you know, structuring around things. It's just about having that connection that if that message does come through or whatever, it's yeah, you just kind of, you can rely on it. I think that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it, like I said, it's just knowing that there's someone there who's checking in or available to chat, right? So it does make a huge difference.
Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you guys. We should definitely do this again sometime. Maybe we should pick some random things from our childhood that we all grew up with and kind of reminisce over them. I know Mike and I, we've spoken about doing some stuff around old 80s action movies.
Yeah, I'm game.
Cool.
I'll try to talk about it as much as I can remember. I was still a baby in the 80s, so
all right.
Rub it in. I'm off to get some hair dye now and put a beard dye. So.
All right, guys. Listen, I'm gonna have to say my goodbyes, but it's been great to chat with you. Thanks for having me on again, Firkin, and I look forward to doing it again with you guys soon.
Yeah, no,
well, great.
Appreciate it. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, gentlemen. It was been good fun. I'll speak to you again soon.
Yeah, you take care.
All right, take care.
Cheerio.
Well, that's the end of the episode. Thank you again for tuning in. As always, please leave a 5-star review. And until next week.